You've seen Interstellar 7 times. You could narrate every scene of Breaking Bad from memory. Your friends tease you because you cry at the same moment in the same episode of Grey's Anatomy every single rewatch. And you know exactly when it's coming. Your streaming history is basically a loop. Same shows, same movies, same comfort. And yet, when someone asks what you want to watch tonight, you scroll past hundreds of new titles and somehow land right back on The Office, Season 2, Episode 1. Your algorithm is confused. Your friends are baffled. But your brain? Your brain is doing something genuinely fascinating. And no, you're not boring. You're not stuck. You're not afraid of new things. What's actually happening inside your head when you choose the familiar over the new is one of the most interesting stories psychology has to tell. So let's talk about it. Here's the question everyone skips past. Why would a rational human being invest 2 hours of their limited time on Earth into something they've already seen? You know the ending. You know the twist. You know exactly which scene is going to make you tear up. There is literally zero new information. And yet, the answer starts with something called the mere exposure effect, a psychological phenomenon first identified by researcher Robert Zajonc in the 1960s. His finding was simple and slightly unsettling. The more you're exposed to something, the more you like it. Familiarity doesn't breed contempt. It breeds comfort. It breeds affection. It breeds the feeling you get when the opening credits of your favorite show roll and your entire nervous system exhales. But the mere exposure effect is just the surface. Underneath it is something deeper, something your brain is doing on purpose. When you watch something for the first time, your brain is working hard. It's tracking characters, building timelines, interpreting dialogue, looking for clues, trying to predict what happens next. It's exciting, yes, but it's also cognitively expensive. You are essentially doing mental cardio. Rewatching is the opposite. Psychologist Crystal Antonia Russell, who has studied media reconsumption extensively, found that revisiting familiar content gives people a genuine sense of psychological replenishment. Your brain shifts into a lower gear. You're not hunting for information. You're absorbing an experience you already understand. The narrative surprise is gone, which sounds like a downside, but it's actually the whole point. Think about what that means in the context of a real week. You've navigated difficult conversations, absorbed stressful news, made hundreds of small decisions, managed other people's emotions on top of your own. By the time evening comes, the last thing you need is more cognitive demand. A new show requires investment. A familiar one offers return without cost. You already know this world. You're welcome here. You don't have to work. This is your brain choosing efficiency over novelty. And that's not a flaw. That's intelligence. Here's the part that surprises people most. You're never actually rewatching the same thing. The show hasn't changed, but you have. Think about the first time you watched The Lion King. You were probably a kid, Simba running from responsibility, living in the jungle, avoiding the past. That was the whole adventure. Now watch it again as an adult with real loss in your life, real responsibilities, real awareness of time moving faster than you expected. Suddenly, Mufasa isn't just a character. He's every parent, every mentor, every person you've lost too soon. The same scene that was background noise as a child becomes something you can barely get through. That's not sentimentality. That's your psychological growth literally revealing itself through a story. Researchers call this narrative transportation, the degree to which we lose ourselves in a story. And it turns out this process changes entirely based on where we are in life. Same story, different you, completely different experience. This is also why people return to books, films, and shows at specific life moments, going through a breakup and going back to eternal sunshine of the spotless mind. Having a baby and suddenly understanding every parenting scene you once ignored, losing someone and finding Coco impossible to finish. You're not rewatching for the plot. You're using the story as a mirror. There's another dimension to this that goes beyond the individual, and it might be the most emotionally significant one. Your favorite shows and movies are almost never just shows and movies. They're time capsules. Maybe you watched Gilmore Girls every Tuesday night with your mother growing up. Maybe you and your college roommates had a tradition around a specific film. Maybe there's a show you discovered with a partner or a friend who moved across the country, or someone you've since lost entirely. When you go back to that content, you're not just visiting fictional characters. You're visiting the version of yourself that existed in that moment. You're keeping a relationship alive through shared narrative memory. Psychologists refer to this as parasocial nostalgia, the blending of real emotional memories with fictional worlds until the two become inseparable. The show becomes a container for the relationship. Rewatching it is a way of returning to someone or somewhere you can't physically get back to. This is why grief and rewatching are surprisingly connected. When we lose someone, we often return to the shows and films we shared with them, not because the content is healing, but because it's the closest thing we have to their presence. It's a form of remembering that doesn't require words. Now let's be honest about something a little less poetic. Sometimes the reason you rewatch something is simply because you cannot make one more decision today. Decision fatigue is real and well documented. By the end of a typical day, the mental energy required to evaluate options is significantly depleted. And choosing something new to watch isn't a small decision. It's actually a cluster of micro decisions. Is the premise interesting? Do I trust the reviews? What if I commit and hate it? What if it gets canceled? What if everyone loves it and I don't? Choosing a familiar show is a decision that's already been made. The risk assessment is complete. The outcome is guaranteed. And in a world that is genuinely unpredictable in ways that matter, your health, your relationships, your finances, the news, there is real value in a 2-hour pocket of guaranteed outcome. You already know this is good. You already know how it ends. You already know you'll feel fine on the other side of it. That's not escapism. That's emotional risk management. Clinical psychologist Dr. Pamela Rutledge has written about the relationship between media consumption and emotional regulation, and her findings point to something important. Familiar content actively reduces anxiety, not as a side effect, as a mechanism. When your nervous system is dysregulated, when the world feels chaotic, when uncertainty is high, when your mind won't quiet down, predictable narrative structure provides a form of containment. The story moves in a direction you already know. The conflict resolves the way you remember. The characters make it through. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end that you've already survived. This is why comfort rewatching spikes during periods of collective stress. It's why people describe certain shows as like a hug. The brain isn't being lazy, it's being strategic. It's reaching for a known emotional experience, the same way the body reaches for warmth in the cold. The controlled emotions of rewatching, the safe sadness, the expected laughter, the tears you could see coming, give the nervous system a chance to feel without being overwhelmed. It's rehearsed emotion. And rehearsed emotion, it turns out, is one of the more underrated tools we have. If you're someone who rewatches regularly, here's the honest psychological profile. You have a strong connection to narrative. You value emotional safety. You process your own life experiences through story. And you're not afraid to return to things that matter to you, even when the world tells you to move on to the next thing. None of that is a problem. The culture pushes novelty constantly. New shows, new films, new content, always new. And novelty has value, but so does depth. So does return. So does the kind of knowing that only comes from living with something long enough to understand it differently every time you come back. Your comfort show isn't a symptom of anything. It's a companion. It's a landmark. It's a place where some version of you will always be waiting. A little younger, a little less complicated, watching something for the first time, not yet knowing how much it was going to matter. And if that means you're starting The Office from the beginning again tonight, honestly, Jim would want it that way. If this gave you something to think about, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. See you there.